Happy King Day, everybody. I am really, really honored and moved to be with you. Rev, you are packing them in today. We have a big crowd here for King Day. Look around you, everybody. Everybody here cares. Everybody here is an activist, a fighter for justice. Give your neighbor a round of applause. National Action Network carrying on Dr. King's legacy, putting it into action every day. Thank you. Reverend Sharpton, thank you. Because I know you, as a young man, took Dr. King's legacy, it coursed through you, you believed it, you believed we had to live it, and you have lived it out every day ever since. Let's thank Reverend Sharpton. Now, Al Sharpton has a habit of saying the blunt truth from time to time. So let me just say something about ICE and this controversy. ICE is now a political arm of Donald Trump's campaign committee. That's what's going on here. ICE is acting to whip up racist fervor. That's what's going on here. This is not about protecting our borders, brothers and sisters. This is not about making us safer. This is the safest big city in America. We are proud of that fact. But that's because we all work together. We believe that all of us are New Yorkers. It doesn't matter where you come from. We do not ask for your papers to know if you're a New Yorker. If you live down the block, you're a New Yorker. If you're on the subway with us, you're a New Yorker. If you work where we work, you're a New Yorker. So let's stop this madness. This is all about trying to create deeper division in this country so Donald Trump can win an election. We're not going to allow this country or our city to be divided. Dr. King believed that we could all find a way together if we overcame the divisions of the past. So I'm telling you what you see coming out of Washington right now. It's a trick we have seen for years and years and years, but we're wise to it, aren't we? And we won't fall for it. This day is a day to really understand what Dr. King stood for. I want to talk about another topic that should be urgently talked about, but it isn't enough of the time. And I want to take you back to the fact that Dr. King, after already saying things that need to be said on the question of race in America, on the question of civil rights, after already having created such a movement for justice, such a movement of conscience that he had many, many enemies, he then decided there was something else that had to be talked about. He decided the war in Vietnam had to be called out for what it was. Now, if you look at the history, many, many people around him advised him not to do it. Many around him told him that if he talked about the blunt truth of what was happening in Vietnam, that he'd lose a lot of support, that a lot of people would walk away from him. But Dr. King showed us what it meant to really speak about what was happening to everyday people, what was happening to their lives. He knew too many young black men were being sent to die in Vietnam. That's right. He knew that we could not turn around our country if we were caught up in an endless war in Vietnam. Dr. King in 1967 went very, very near to here at Riverside Church. He gave a speech called Beyond Vietnam, and it was radical. It was revolutionary. He said, we would never achieve justice if we were in the midst of war. He said you could not have justice while a war was going on. Dr. King was right. And now we find ourselves in a new reality, and it's talked about sometimes, but then somehow it's forgotten. We have been in a series of forever wars. That's right. Afghanistan, Iraq, and now there are some in Washington trying to get us into an even greater war with Iran. The dangers are unestimable. Right now we know Over these last 20 years, we've lost over 6,000 American men and women in the wars in the Middle East. And tens of thousands came back wounded. Their lives will never be the same. Their families will never be the same. A recent study came out that told us something that should shock us all. In these last 20 years of endless wars, our nation has spent $6.4 trillion on war. $6.4 trillion. That money, a small fraction would have given us as a nation pre-K for every child in America. Every child could have had that. A small fraction could have allowed us, not only in America, but all over the world, to end these horrible greenhouse gas emissions that are threatening our future and spurring global warming. Small fraction. If you took all that money, you could have rebuilt every road, every bridge, every subway, every park, and every school in the United States of America. That's what that money could have paid for. Instead, it went to war and death. Dr. King said in 1968 at the National Cathedral, "War plays havoc with our domestic destinies. Something must be done and done quickly." And he said further that no one who has any concern for the integrity and life of America today can ignore the present war. Brothers and sisters, I'm here to say this to you because we're at a moment of decision, but it doesn't feel that way. Have you noticed with Iran that one day it feels like war is just minutes away, and then the next day you don't hear a thing about it? Do you realize that the attack on General Soleimani was the first time since World War II that the United States killed a foreign military leader? Something is happening that is bigger than is being acknowledged. And a war with Iran would mean the endless wars would go on literally for a generation. And that would foreclose any possibility of the justice we seek here in our own nation. I'm going to conclude with this. Dr. King, we look at him with such passion, such belief, such admiration, and we feel a warmth for Dr. King and his memory. But Dr. King could also be a stern voice. He could be a voice that warned us. And in that Beyond Vietnam speech, he said a simple thing. He said, "A time comes when silence is betrayal." We cannot be silent on the growing march to war in Iran. We cannot be silent to the fact that there are some in Washington who would like to see us in these endless wars. There are some who believe the endless wars will stop the kind of changes that we need. And we can't be silent about that. I will conclude with a hopeful point, and I believe it in my heart. Because when I've stood here before, I have been in the company of people who believe that silence is unacceptable. And I know the people gathered here today believe silence is unacceptable. We all stood up a few years ago and we said we would not be silent on stop and frisk, and now stop and frisk is gone. We stood up after the election of Donald Trump and on behalf of the rights of women held the biggest protest in the history of the United States of America. We are standing up right now against the voices of hate that are raging around us and trying to reshape our society. One good thing about New Yorkers, we are rarely silent. But we got to be even louder now. So brothers and sisters, mark King Day with a full recognition of what he called us to. He called us to use our voices. He called us to march in the streets. He called us to never look away from the truth. And the truth is, if they take us into another war, we will never be able to have the nation we deserve. So let's stop it now. Thank you. God bless you all.